The Montana wind carried secrets through the pines, cold and sharp as a blade drawn slow across stone. Rebecca Cain stood at the edge of her property, rifle resting easy against her shoulder, eyes tracking the deer moving through the clearing 200 yards out. Her breath came steady, controlled, the kind of breathing that separated amateurs from professionals. The kind that kept you alive when the distance stretched beyond reason, and the margin for error vanished into mathematics and faith. She was 42 years old, 20 years in the Army, 5 years out. The scars on her hands told one story. The scar along her jawline told another. But the marks you couldn't see, those were the ones that woke her at 3 in the morning when the house was silent and the past refused to stay buried. 3 children stood behind her in a ragged line, locals from the valley whose parents paid her to teach them how to shoot. Not for war, for elk season, for putting food on winter tables, for understanding that a rifle wasn't a toy or a symbol but a tool that demanded respect the same way fire demanded respect. She taught them the old way. No scopes with digital readouts. No lasers painting targets red. Just iron sights and wind, and the truth that lived in the space between your heartbeat and the squeeze of a trigger. The buck raised its head, antlers catching the autumn light. One of the kids whispered behind her, a boy, maybe 12, eager and undisciplined. She heard his breath quicken, heard him shift his weight, all the tells of someone about to speak. She raised one finger without turning. Silence fell like snow. The wind shifted, 3 degrees west. She felt it on her cheek before the trees showed it. The buck took 2 steps left. She adjusted, a micro-movement barely perceptible. The world narrowed. The rifle became an extension of her skeleton. She stopped thinking about the shot and simply became it. The trigger broke clean. 800 yards out, the buck dropped before the sound reached it. The kids erupted behind her, voices high with excitement, but she was already safing the weapon, ejecting the spent casing, catching it in her palm. Warm brass, smooth and solid. She held it for 3 seconds, then pocketed it. Every round counted, every single one. The oldest kid, a girl named Sarah with serious eyes, stepped closer. "Miss Cain, you ever miss?" Rebecca looked at her. The girl had the temperament for this, patient, observant, the kind who asked real questions. Once, Rebecca said, the words sat heavy between them. The girl waited, knowing better than to push. Rebecca shouldered the rifle, started walking toward the deer. "I missed once. That's the reason I count every round now." They hiked in silence, boots crunching through frost-hardened grass. When they reached the animal, Rebecca knelt, placed one hand on its flank, still warm. She looked at the kids gathered around her. "You see where the bullet entered?" They nodded, examining the clean wound high on the shoulder. "One shot," she said, "clean, fast. The animal didn't suffer, that's respect. You take a life, you do it right. No wounding, no chasing something bleeding through the woods for an hour because you rushed your shot. You wait for the moment, you make it count." She showed them how to field dress the carcass, hands moving with practiced efficiency, teaching them that hunting wasn't about killing, but about understanding the full weight of what that killing meant. By the time they finished, the sun had dropped behind the western peaks and the temperature was falling hard. They loaded the deer into the bed of her truck. She paid the kids, sent them home, watched their parents' vehicles disappear down the dirt road that wound through the valley like a scar through flesh. Then she was alone. She stood there as twilight bled into darkness, looking at the mountains that had been her sanctuary for 5 years. The mountains that had never asked her about Sierra Team or classified missions, or the 3 names she couldn't say out loud without tasting copper in her mouth. The sound of an engine broke the silence. Black SUV, government plates, moving too fast for the gravel road. She knew what it was before it stopped, knew who would step out. You didn't spend 20 years in the machine without learning to recognize its moving parts. Colonel James Davidson emerged into the cold, breath-misting, wearing his dress uniform under a heavy coat. 61 years old, gray at the temples, eyes that had seen too much and forgot nothing. He'd been her commanding officer once, her mentor, the man who'd shaped her into the weapon she'd become. He was also the man she hadn't spoken to in 5 years. "You're retired, Jim," she said without preamble. "What brings you out here?" He stopped 10 feet away, respecting the distance. "I need the shepherd one more time." The nickname hit her like a fist. She hadn't heard it in half a decade. Shepherd, the one who brings the flock home, the one who never leaves anyone behind. Except she had. "I don't do that anymore," she said. He reached into his coat, pulled out a manila envelope, held it out. She didn't move. He set it on the hood of her truck and stepped back. "Just look." She stared at the envelope for a long moment. Every instinct screamed to walk away, to let the past stay dead. But something in Davidson's face stopped her. Not desperation, not manipulation, just exhaustion. The kind that came from carrying weight too long alone. She opened the envelope. A single photograph slid into her palm. Marcus Stone, Staff Sergeant Marcus Stone, Call Sign Flint, her spotter, her brother in everything but blood. The man who'd lain beside her on a dozen mountains in a dozen countries, reading wind and distance, trusting her to make shots that defied physics and common sense. In the photo, he stood at a grave, Arlington National Cemetery. The headstone was angled away from the camera, the name obscured, but she didn't need to see it to know whose grave it was. "He visits every year," Davidson said quietly. "Same day. Same time. He stands there for an hour and doesn't say a word. I think you know whose stone that is." Rebecca's hand tightened on the photo. Her jaw worked. When she spoke, her voice came out flat, stripped of everything but control. "I'm not going back to that mountain." "You don't have to," Davidson said. "The mountain's coming to you." She looked up sharply. He met her gaze. "Fort Carson, 3 days from now. They're holding the Centennial Challenge, 100-year anniversary of Army Sniper School, 4,800 meters, best shooters in the world competing. Winner leads the new Sniper Doctrine program." "I don't compete." Nina Kessler's competing. Her new drone system, Project Titan. She wins, they transition the entire program to unmanned precision. No more human snipers, no more teams. Rebecca said nothing, but something shifted in her eyes. "Flint's going to be there," Davidson continued. "He asked specifically if you were coming. I told him I'd try." "What's his reason?" Davidson's face creased with something like pain. "Because he needs to hear you say it wasn't his fault, and you need to hear him say it wasn't yours." Rebecca turned away, looked at the mountains going dark against the deeper darkness of the sky. The wind moved through the pines. Somewhere distant, an owl called. All the sounds of a world that kept turning whether you were ready or not. "How many dead this time?" she asked. Davidson didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice carried the weight of truth he'd been holding back. "None yet, but that can change." She closed her eyes, counted to 10, opened them. "One shot," she said, "then I'm gone." Davidson nodded. "I'll have a car here at 0600 day after tomorrow." He walked back to the SUV, paused with his hand on the door. "Rebecca." She didn't turn. "Thank you." The SUV's taillights disappeared down the valley. She stood alone in the cold, the photograph still in her hand, Marcus Stone's face staring up at her from the glossy paper. Behind him, the headstone. Behind that, the weight of everything that happened when good soldiers made hard calls and the world made them pay for it anyway. She went inside. The cabin was small, efficient, built by her own hands over the course of a year. No electricity beyond a generator. No internet. No connection to the world that had chewed her up and tried to spit her out. Just wood and stone and the kind of silence that let you think or drove you mad depending on which way your mind was built. She set the photo on the table, poured 2 fingers of whiskey into a glass, didn't drink it, just looked at it. Amber liquid catching the lamplight. She'd quit drinking 3 years ago. Realized she was using it to sleep, and sleep was supposed to come natural if you had a clear conscience. Her conscience hadn't been clear since the day Sierra team went dark. She reached for a shelf above the fireplace, pulled down a wooden box, ran her fingers over the lid. No markings, nothing to identify what was inside. She knew anyway, had known every day for 10 years without opening it once. Now she lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in oiled cloth, a rifle scope, shattered. A bullet hole punched clean through the forward lens, spiderwebbing the glass, destroying the optics. Unusable, worthless. Except it wasn't. She lifted it, held it to the light. Through the damaged glass, the world looked fractured, broken into pieces that didn't fit together anymore. Like memory, like truth. The scope had been mounted on her rifle the day Sierra team took the shot. The day 3 men died and she woke up in a medevac with blood in her mouth and no memory of how she got there. The army had offered her a new scope. She'd refused, kept this one, carried it out of country in her pack, never explained her reasoning. She set it back in the box, closed the lid. Tomorrow she'd need to make calls, arrange for someone to feed her horses, check the weather between Montana and Colorado, clean her rifle, do all the mechanical things that kept you from thinking about the things that mattered. But tonight, she sat in the lamplight and let herself remember what she could. Afghanistan, winter, mountains so high the air cut your lungs with every breath. Sierra team, 5 strong, inserted under darkness 40 clicks from anywhere that showed on maps. Their mission, observe and report on a compound where intelligence suggested high-value targets were gathering. Reconnaissance only. Eyes on, hands off. She remembered the cold. Remembered Flint beside her, breath steady, patience infinite. Remembered the other 3. Jackson, Martinez, and the 4th whose name she couldn't immediately pull from the fog of concussion and trauma. 3 faces, 3 voices. 3 soldiers who'd trusted her judgment when the moment came and everything went wrong. She remembered looking through the scope, seeing the compound come alive with activity. Remembered the vehicles, the armed men, the sudden spike of radio chatter that meant something was happening, something big, something now. And then the memory went white, static, nothing. The next clear thing was waking in the helicopter, rotors thundering, someone shouting about bleeding, about pressure, about stay with us, Sergeant. She tried to sit up, seen the body bags strapped to the deck. 3 of them, black and still and final. She tried to ask what happened. Her jaw wouldn't work. Shrapnel had torn through her face, shattered teeth, filled her mouth with blood. A medic held her down, gentle but firm, told her to breathe, told her she was going home, told her everything would be all right. It wasn't all right. They'd given her medals, full disability, honorable discharge with commendations, the kind of exit that looked good on paper and felt like betrayal in the bone. And through it all, through the hospitals and the therapy and the slow reconstruction of a face that worked but didn't look quite right anymore, nobody would tell her what happened on that mountain. The mission was classified. The after-action report was sealed. Even Davidson, who'd run the operation from command, wouldn't give her details. "You took shrapnel," he'd said. "Severe concussion. Some memories don't come back." She'd pushed, he'd stonewalled. Eventually she'd stopped asking. Now, sitting in her cabin with the broken scope in a box and a photograph of Marcus Stone on her table, she wondered if maybe it was time to start asking again. She slept poorly, the kind of sleep where you're half aware of dreams turning into memories turning into fears. When dawn came gray and cold through the windows, she was already up, coffee made, bag packed. The drive to Fort Carson took 14 hours straight through. She didn't stop except for gas, didn't eat, kept the radio off and the windows cracked so the cold air would keep her sharp. Somewhere in Wyoming she passed a cemetery and thought about stopping, paying respects to graves that weren't there, but she drove on. The dead didn't need visits. The living needed answers. She arrived at the base just after sunset. The gates were familiar. The guard checked her retired military ID, waved her through. She found guest quarters, dropped her bag, stood in the small room staring at cinder block walls painted institutional beige. A knock at the door. She opened it. Marcus Stone stood in the hallway, older than the photograph, gray threading through his hair, lines around his eyes deeper than she remembered. But the same. Fundamentally, utterly the same. They stared at each other for 5 seconds that felt like 5 years. "Been a while, Shepard," he said. His voice carried the Texas drawl that no amount of training had ever smoothed out. 5 years, 3 months, she said. "You counting?" "I count everything." His mouth twitched, almost a smile, not quite. "You look good." "You look old." Now he did smile, fair. She stepped back. He came in. They stood in the small room, years and distance, and the weight of 3 dead friends between them like furniture you had to navigate around. "I didn't think you'd come," he said. "I didn't think I would either. But you're here." She nodded. Flint reached into his jacket, pulled out something wrapped in cloth, held it out. She took it, unfolded the fabric. A rifle scope, old, scratched but intact, functional. "Found it in the ruins," he said. "After they pulled us out, thought you'd want it back." She turned it over in her hands. The scope she'd been using before everything went white, before the shrapnel, before the missing hours that haunted her more than the dead. "What happened that day, Flint?" His face closed. "You don't remember." "I remember shooting. I remember waking up in a medevac, 3 body bags." He looked away. "That's more than I wish you remembered." "Then tell me the rest." He was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice came carefully, like a man walking through a minefield. "You took shrapnel to the head. Doctor said you had severe concussion, said some memories might never come back. But you remember." He met her eyes. "Yeah, I remember." "So tell me." "I can't." "What's stopping you?" "Because it's still classified. Because only Davidson knows the full picture. Because whoever ordered the hit made sure the truth stayed buried." She felt something cold settle in her chest. Ordered the hit, past tense, specific language. "We were sent to observe," she said slowly. "Reconnaissance only." "That's right." "But I took a shot anyway." He didn't answer, didn't need to. The silence was confirmation enough. "What was my reason?" she asked. "I need to understand what I saw." Flint's jaw tightened. "Because you saw something, something that changed the calculation." "What did I see?" He shook his head. "That's where it gets classified. That's where I can't go." "Can't or won't?" His eyes hardened. "Don't, Rebecca. Don't make me choose between you and the oath." She wanted to push, wanted to grab him by the collar and demand answers. But she'd been a soldier long enough to know that some walls didn't come down no matter how hard you hit them. She set the scope on the table beside the broken one. 2 scopes, 2 versions of the same story, one shattered, one whole, neither one showing her what she needed to see. "Are you competing tomorrow?" she asked, changing direction. He nodded. "Got entered by my co. 4,800 meters, longest official attempt in U.S. military history." "You think you can make it?" Flint smiled without humor. "Not a chance. Wind at that distance is pure chaos, but I'll try. That's what we do, right? Try impossible things and see what breaks." She almost smiled back, almost. "I should let you rest," he said, moving toward the door. "Big day tomorrow." "Flint." He stopped, hand on the knob. "I'm glad you're alive." Something shifted in his face, softened. "Yeah, Shepard, me too." He left. She stood alone in the room, 2 scopes on the table, ghosts in the corners, and the growing certainty that tomorrow wasn't about competition at all. It was about answers, about confronting the parts of the past that refused to stay buried. She lay down on the narrow bed, didn't bother undressing, stared at the ceiling, counted heartbeats, wondered what she'd see when she looked through a scope tomorrow, wondered if the distance would finally show her the truth. Sleep came eventually, shallow and restless, full of mountains and wind, and the sound of gunfire echoing through canyons that had no end. Morning arrived with parade ground efficiency. 0500 mess hall, coffee strong enough to dissolve rust. She ate alone, watching soldiers move through their routines, all of them young enough to be her children. A different army than the one she'd left, softer in some ways, harder in others. Technology everywhere. Screens and sensors and satellites that could read a license plate from orbit. She wondered what they'd need her for in a world like this. The range was massive, carved into high desert that stretched toward mountains still dusted with early snow. Targets at intervals from 500 meters out to the main event, 4,800 meters distant. A steel plate barely visible even with optics, shimmering in the heat distortion that rose from the hardpan. Spectators gathered in bleachers, officers, press, civilians from defense contractors wearing suits too expensive for government work, all of them here to watch history or watch it fail. Either outcome made good television. She stood apart from the competitors, checking her rifle for the 10th time. Standard Army issue. Nothing fancy. The kind of weapon you could drop in mud and it would still fire. She'd requested it specifically. Turned down the match-grade precision instruments they'd offered. If she was going to make this shot, she'd make it with the same tools she'd carried on every mountain in every war. A woman approached from the bleachers. Late 40s, severe haircut, eyes that calculated before they observed. She wore the uniform of a lieutenant colonel, insignia marking her as some kind of technical specialist. "Master Sergeant Cain," the woman said. "I'm Lieutenant Colonel Nina Kessler. I run Project Titan." Rebecca said nothing, just watched. Kessler smiled, thin and professional. "I've read your file, very impressive record, until Sierra Team." Rebecca's expression didn't change, but something went cold behind her eyes. "Careful, Colonel, that's classified." Kessler's smile widened. "Not for long. My drones will make classified missions obsolete. No more teams going dark. No more soldiers coming home in pieces or not at all." She gestured toward the range where a mechanical platform was being positioned. Sleek angles, sensor arrays, the kind of equipment that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. "That's Titan 3, Kessler said. "Autonomous targeting system. 4,800 meters is well within its operational parameters. When it wins today, Congress will see that human error is the last variable we need to eliminate." Rebecca looked at the machine, then back at Kessler. "And when it malfunctions in the field, When the satellite link drops or the power fails or someone hacks the system, what then? Kessler's smile faded. It won't. Everything fails, Colonel. The question is whether failure kills the mission or kills the team. We'll see, won't we? Kessler walked away. Rebecca watched her go, noticed the wedding ring on the woman's left hand. Old, worn, the kind you keep wearing long after the marriage ends because taking it off would mean accepting something you're not ready to accept. A voice spoke behind her, making friends already. She turned. A young man, maybe 26, sergeant stripes, cocky smile. Dylan Cross, according to his name tape. He had the build of someone who spent more time in the gym than the field, but his eyes were sharp. Staff Sergeant Cross, she said, reading his rank. Ma'am, he offered his hand. She shook it. I've studied every shot you made. Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, you're a legend. Legends are dead people. I'm just a rancher. He grinned. Well, this rancher's about to show the whole world that humans aren't obsolete. You seem confident. I am, because machines can't do what we do. They can't adapt. They can't feel the wind change before it happens. They just calculate and hope. Rebecca studied him. Young, talented, arrogant, she'd been all three once. You competing? She asked. Yes, ma'am, and I plan to win. Good luck. His grin widened. I don't need luck. I need 3.2 seconds of perfect wind. He walked away, swagger in every step. She almost envied his certainty. Once, she'd been that sure. Before mountains and missing memories and body bags taught her that certainty was just another word for not knowing enough yet. Colonel Davidson found her, as they called competitors to the line. You ready? He asked. She looked at the distant target, the one that would define careers and budgets, and the future of how America put bullets downrange. 4,800 meters. 3 miles of air and wind and chaos between here and there. No, she said, but I'll shoot anyway. He smiled. That's the shepherd I remember. They called the first shooter. A Marine, Sergeant Major, 20 years in scout sniper platoons. He took his position, spotter beside him, both of them professionals going through the arithmetic of murder at distance. The shot cracked across the desert, 15 seconds of silence, then the spotter's voice, flat and final. Missed 2 meters left. The crowd murmured. The Marine stood, face expressionless, walked off the line, one down. Dylan Cross went next. He settled behind his rifle like he belonged there, confidence in every movement. Rebecca watched his breathing, his trigger discipline, the way he waited for the wind. He fired. The wait seemed longer, 18 seconds, then the spotter. Hit, 12 centimeters off center. The crowd erupted. First hit of the day. Dylan stood, grinning, pumping his fist. The range officer called elimination. Anything over 10 centimeters didn't qualify for the next round. Dylan's grin died. He stared at the officer like he'd been slapped. But sir, I hit. Outside parameters, you're out. Dylan looked toward Rebecca. She gave him nothing. No sympathy, no comfort. Just the flat truth that the desert had taught her long ago. Close didn't count. Perfect was the enemy of good enough, but good enough still had to be good enough. Dylan walked off, shoulders tight, the sting of failure worse than the miss would have been. 3 more shooters, 3 more failures, wind gusts, mirage distortion, the mathematics of chaos winning every time. Then they wheeled out Titan III. The drone settled onto its firing platform, servos whining as it calibrated, sensors sweeping the range, gathering data that human eyes couldn't see and human brains couldn't process fast enough to matter. Colonel Kessler stood beside it, tablet in hand, monitoring readouts. The machine fired without drama, no breath, no heartbeat, just calculation and execution. 22 seconds passed. The spotter's voice came, surprised despite his training. Hit 4 centimeters off center. The crowd went wild. Media cameras swung toward Kessler, catching her satisfaction. The future live on broadcast television, perfect, efficient, inhuman. Rebecca watched the machine being reset, calculating the next shot it would never need to take because 4,800 meters was already proven, already conquered by mathematics and engineering. Then they called her name. Master Sergeant Rebecca Cain, you're up. She walked to the line carrying her rifle like it weighed nothing, like the years between wars and mountains and now had left no mark at all. Flint met her there, already in position as her spotter, like they'd planned it, like some things were too deep to need planning. Wind's variable, he said quietly, 15 to 35 knots, gusting unpredictable. This is a suicide shot, Shepard. She settled into position, felt the ground beneath her, solid and real, loaded a single round. The brass caught sunlight gleaming. Flint spoke again, softer. What's the count? 4 lives owed, she said. 1 bullet left. He understood, didn't question, just ranged the target, called the distance, fell into the rhythm they'd perfected on a dozen mountains when the world was simpler and the dead were still alive. The crowd went silent, 200 people holding breath. Rebecca closed her eyes, listened. The wind wasn't chaos if you stopped trying to predict it and just let it speak. It had rhythm, patterns, frequencies that lived below conscious thought. She opened her eyes, adjusted the scope. Not much. Micro movements, the kind that looked like nothing and meant everything. Her finger touched the trigger, light barely there. Flint's voice, steady, wind's calm, 5 knots, it's perfect. She didn't fire. Too perfect, she said. Wind's never perfect. They waited, the crowd shifted, uncertain. 30 seconds passed, a minute, someone coughed. The sound carried across the desert like thunder. Then the wind changed, a gust from the west, 15 knots building to 20. The flags along the range snapped taut. There, she said, now it's real. And fired. The round left the barrel at 2,900 feet per second, spinning, stabilized, beginning the long arc through air that would push it, slow it, try to kill its momentum before it reached the target 3 miles away. 16 seconds of silence. Rebecca didn't move, didn't breathe, just existed in the space between action and consequence, the place where soldiers lived when the shooting stopped and the dying hadn't started yet. The sound came back across the desert, a ping, metal on metal, distant and clear. The spotter took 5 seconds to confirm, like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Hit, he said finally, dead center, 0 deviation. The crowd didn't react immediately. The silence stretched. Then someone started clapping. Then everyone. The sound built like thunder rolling up a canyon, applause and shock, and the sudden understanding that they just watched something that shouldn't have been possible. Rebecca stood, saved her weapon, ejected the casing, caught it, pocketed it. Every round counts. Kessler was staring at her, tablet forgotten in her hands, the machine beside her suddenly looking like exactly what it was. A tool, sophisticated, expensive, soulless. Colonel Davidson stepped onto the range, hand extended. Rebecca shook it. That wasn't luck, he said quietly. That was art. She looked past him, toward the distant target she couldn't see but knew she'd hit. Didn't feel like art, felt like math and patience. The media swarmed. She walked through them without stopping, without answering questions, moving toward the equipment tent where she could break down her rifle and disappear before the speeches started. But someone was waiting. A woman, captain's rank, early 30s, dark hair pulled back severe, eyes that cataloged before they judged. She wore an intelligence tab on her uniform. "Master Sergeant Cain, I'm Captain Eva Reyes, can we talk?" Rebecca kept walking. "No." Reyes matched her pace. "I've been investigating Sierra team for 2 years. Rebecca stopped, turned, looked at the woman with eyes that had ended lives at distances most people couldn't conceptualize. "What's your interest?" "Because the official report doesn't match the evidence." Rebecca waited. Reyes pulled out a tablet, swiped to an image, held it out. Satellite photo, 10 years old, grainy but clear enough. A mountain ridge, 5 figures in prone position, Sierra team. And on the opposite ridge, 2 more figures, also prone, also armed. "Who were they?" Rebecca asked quietly. "That's what I'm trying to find out. Records are sealed. Davidson won't talk. But I think," Reyes paused, something shifting in her face, "I think you were sent to kill the wrong target." "What makes you think I'll help?" "My father was a sniper. He died that year. Same region. I think," her voice caught, "I think he might have been on that ridge." Rebecca stared at the image. 2 figures. Unknown affiliation. Unknown mission. Unknown everything except the certainty that they'd been there, watching Sierra team, maybe waiting for something, maybe part of something larger than one observation mission on one mountain. She handed the tablet back. "I can't help you." "Can't or won't?" Rebecca met her eyes. "Does it matter?" She walked away, leaving Reyes standing alone. But the image stayed with her. 2 figures. A second team. Questions that had been buried for a decade suddenly rising like bodies in a thawing river. That night, after the ceremony she didn't attend and the dinner she skipped, after the speeches about the future of precision warfare and the demonstration of Titan IV, the upgraded model that could supposedly hit targets at 6,000 meters, she sat in her quarters alone. Her phone buzzed, unknown number, encrypted text. She almost deleted it, almost. But she opened it instead. 3 words appeared. Sierra was a lie. Then 3 more. You were targeted. Then a final line that stopped her breath. They're still watching. Signed simply, Ghost 4. Rebecca stared at the screen. Ghost 4. The call sign of the teammate whose name the trauma had locked away until this moment. Thomas Chen, 28 years old, father of 2, the best forward observer she'd ever worked with. Dead 10 years. Or not. She typed back, "Prove it." The response came immediately, an image, a photo, recent, taken from high ground, looking down at Fort Carson, at the range, at her standing behind her rifle taking the shot that had made headlines. Someone had been watching, someone who knew her call sign, someone who wanted her to know they were alive. Or someone who wanted her to think a dead man was sending messages. Either way, it meant the past wasn't finished with her. She loaded her rifle, checked the magazine, moved to the window, scanned the darkness beyond the base perimeter looking for scope glint, for movement, for anything that shouldn't be there. Nothing, just night and distance and the growing certainty that tomorrow's competition had never been about shooting at all. It had been about making her visible, drawing her out, putting her in one place at one time where anyone watching would know exactly where to find her. She moved away from the window, killed the lights, sat in darkness with her rifle across her lap and her back to the wall. "If you're alive," she whispered to the empty room, to the ghost on the phone, to whatever was hunting her or testing her or trying to drag her back into the mountains where 3 men died, and the truth got buried. If you're alive, I'll find you. She paused. If you're not, someone's using your name. Either way, they're dead. The phone buzzed again. One final message. Roof, North Building, OH300, come alone. Rebecca checked her watch. 2 hours. She smiled without humor, loaded a second magazine, checked her knife, started calculating fields of fire and escape routes and all the geometry of violence that had kept her alive when smarter soldiers died. 2 hours to prepare. 2 hours to decide if she was walking into an ambush or a revelation. 2 hours to count every round and remember that she'd promised to bring her flock home. Even if her flock had been dead for 10 years. Even if coming home meant facing whoever had made sure they died in the first place. The wind outside picked up, howling across the desert, carrying secrets and lies and the weight of choices made on distant mountains when the only witness was sky and stone, and the scope that showed you everything except the truth. She sat in the darkness and waited for O300, counting heartbeats, counting rounds, counting all the ways this could go wrong and the one way it might finally go right. The shepherd was going hunting. And this time she wouldn't miss. The clock on the wall ticked toward O300 with the patience of something that had watched 1,000 soldiers count down to moments that would define or destroy them. Rebecca Cain sat in darkness, rifle across her lap, breathing measured and deliberate. The kind of breathing that lowered heart rate and steadied hands. The kind that turned a human being into a precision instrument. She'd stripped the rifle down and reassembled it twice in the last hour, not because it needed checking, because her hands needed something to do while her mind worked through variables. Rooftop, North Building, come alone. 3 elements that added up to ambush in any language soldiers spoke. But Ghost 4's message had included the photograph. Her, taking the shot, captured from high ground with professional quality optics. Whoever sent it had been watching, had the skill to remain unseen, had chosen to reach out rather than pull a trigger. That suggested something other than simple violence. Or it suggested someone smart enough to know that curious targets walked into traps more readily than threatened ones. She checked her watch. 02:30, time to move. The base at night carried its own rhythm. Guard rotations every 4 hours. Security patrols on predictable routes. Cameras covering main thoroughfares but blind in the gaps between buildings where budget and architecture created shadows. She'd walked enough bases in enough countries to read the pattern like sheet music. She moved through those gaps now, rifle broken down in a pack, sidearm under her jacket, knife against her spine. Just another soldier unable to sleep, out for a walk, nothing to see here. The guard she passed nodded, recognizing the restlessness that came standard with the uniform. Nobody questioned. Nobody stopped her. The North Building was administration. 4 stories of offices and conference rooms, empty at this hour except for whatever security post had on overnight watch. The roof access was supposed to be locked. She found it propped open with a wedge of wood, fresh scrape marks on the frame where someone had forced it recently. She drew her sidearm, moved through the door soft and low, scanning corners, checking sight lines. The stairwell climbed into darkness. Her footsteps made no sound. 20 years of moving through hostile territory had taught her how to become a ghost herself. The roof door stood open 6 inches. Wind pushed through the gap, cold and sharp. She stopped 3 steps down, listening. Heard nothing but wind and the distant hum of generators. No breathing, no fabric shifting, no metallic click of a weapon coming to ready. She pushed through fast, sidearm up, sweeping left then right. The roof was empty. ventilation units, antenna arrays, air conditioning machinery, all of it still and silent under a sky so clear the stars looked close enough to touch. She moved to the edge, scanning the compound below, looking for watchers, for snipers, for anything that suggested this was the trap it felt like. Nothing. Then she saw it, taped to a ventilation unit, a laptop screen glowing faint in the darkness. She approached carefully, weapon ready, expecting trip wires or pressure plates or any of the 100 ways to turn a piece of technology into a weapon. But there was nothing, just the laptop playing a video on loop. She recognized the footage immediately. Helmet camera, the kind special operations wore for after-action review. The timestamp in the corner read 10 years ago. The location coordinates matched the mountains where Sierra team had died. Her hand trembled as she pressed play from the beginning. The perspective was from Ghost 4's position, Thomas Chen's position. She could see her own back 20 meters ahead, prone behind her rifle, Flint beside her calling range and wind. The other two members of Sierra team, Jackson and Martinez, were positioned on the flanks, providing security. The video had no sound, but she didn't need audio to remember what happened next. She watched herself adjust the scope, saw her finger move to the trigger, saw the recoil as the rifle fired. The timestamp showed the bullet's flight time, 4.2 seconds at that range. Then the world exploded. The video captured it in brutal clarity, a muzzle flash from the opposite ridge, different angle, different position, someone else shooting. The round came in fast and precise, not at her but at Ghost 4. The helmet camera jerked violently as the bullet impacted, then went tumbling, showing sky and stone, and finally coming to rest facing back toward Sierra team's position. From that angle, she watched Jackson take a round through the chest, watched Martinez turn toward the threat and get cut down before he could return fire, watched Flint throw himself over her body as debris from a near miss showered them both with shrapnel. The video kept rolling, showed Flint dragging her unconscious form toward cover, showed him firing back at an enemy she couldn't see from this angle, showed him speaking into his radio, calling for extract, for air support, for anything that would get them out alive. Then the video cut to black. New footage appeared, different camera, different angle. This one was from a surveillance drone, high-altitude thermal imaging. She watched Sierra team's position light up in white-hot signatures, watched 3 signatures go cold, watched 2 others move frantically, one dragging the other. And on the opposite ridge, she watched 2 thermal signatures disappear into a vehicle and drive away. Slowly, methodically, no panic, no pursuit, just a clean exit after a successful hit. The timestamp on the drone footage showed it was recorded by U.S. assets. Someone had been watching. Someone had seen American forces getting killed by unknown shooters and had done nothing. Or had done exactly what they were supposed to do. The video ended. A text file appeared on screen. She read it 3 times, each pass making her colder. Sierra team mission brief. Classified top secret. Observe and report only. Do not engage. Repeat. Do not engage. Target is friendly asset. Elimination will compromise ongoing intelligence operation. She stared at the words until they blurred. Friendly asset. The man she'd killed through a scope at 4,200 meters had been working for the United States. A double agent. A mole. Someone who'd spent years embedded in enemy networks, feeding intelligence that saved American lives. And she'd put a bullet through his brain, because she'd seen him arming what looked like an explosive device in a compound full of civilians. The next file opened automatically. Audio recording, scratchy, old, radio transmission from 10 years ago. A voice she didn't recognize. Sierra Actual, this is Overwatch. Confirm your team has visual on target. Davidson's voice, younger, tighter. Confirmed, Sierra team is in position. Orders stand, observe only. Target is designated friendly. Repeat, friendly asset. Copy that, observe only. 30 seconds of static. Then her own voice, distant, filtered through Flint's radio. I have the shot. Davidson, urgent now. Negative, Sierra 1, stand down, I say again, stand down. Her voice again, harder. Target is arming device. Civilians in blast radius. I'm taking the shot. Sierra 1, do not engage. That's an order. The crack of her rifle, unmistakable even through degraded audio. Then Davidson, voice gone flat with something like horror. All stations, Sierra team is compromised. Execute protocol Shepard. Eliminate witnesses. The recording ended. She stood on the roof, wind cutting through her jacket, mind trying to process what her ears had just heard. Davidson had ordered the hit, not on enemy forces, on his own team, on her. Protocol Shepard. They'd named the execution order after her call sign, the one who brings the flock home, except this time the shepherd was supposed to die with the flock. She heard footsteps on the stairs, multiple sets, moving fast but trying to be quiet. She grabbed the laptop, moved behind a ventilation unit, sidearm ready. 5 figures emerged onto the roof. Military bearing but no uniforms, tactical gear, suppressed weapons. They spread out in a practice pattern, clearing the space with professional efficiency. Then a 6th figure appeared, Colonel Davidson. He looked older in the starlight, more tired, like he'd been carrying weight that finally broke something inside him. He saw her immediately, raised one hand, stopping his team from advancing. Master Sergeant Cain, he said quietly, we need to talk. She kept the sidearm trained on his center mass. Your men lower their weapons first. He nodded to the team. They hesitated, then complied, muzzles dropping but fingers still near triggers. Rebecca stepped out from cover, laptop under one arm, weapon steady. You sent people to kill us. Davidson's face creased with something that might have been pain. I had no choice. She laughed, short and bitter. That's what commanders always say right before they explain how killing their own soldiers was actually the right call. It wasn't the right call, he said. It was the only call. Then explain it to me. He gestured to the roof edge, to the view of the compound below, to the mountains beyond. Can we do this somewhere less exposed? Here's fine. Davidson sighed, shoulders sagging. The asset you killed was CIA, embedded in a terrorist network for 3 years. He was days away from identifying the entire leadership structure. Your shot destroyed 3 years of work and got 50 operatives executed when the network realized they had a mole. She felt something cold settle in her chest. The device was a controlled detonation. No casualties, part of his cover. Intelligence had confirmed it hours before your mission launched. You weren't supposed to engage. I saw civilians. There weren't any. What you saw was staged, theater to maintain his cover. Her hand tightened on the weapon. Then someone should have told us. He met her eyes, because the mission was need to know, and your team didn't need to know. So you sent us in blind. I sent you to observe, you chose to shoot. Because it looked like the right call. And it was the wrong one. His voice rose, then caught, dropping back to something quieter. I was ordered to eliminate the team, make it look like enemy action, clean up the mess before it became an international incident. But you didn't. No, I couldn't, so I hired a contract team, told them to make it fast, make it clean, Make sure nobody suffered." Rebecca stared at him. "You hired mercenaries to kill your own soldiers." "To kill 4 soldiers and save 1, he said. "I made sure you survived. Made sure the shrapnel looked accidental. Made sure the extraction team got there before you bled out." "What was your reason?" "Because you were right about one thing. The asset had gone rogue. Our intelligence was wrong. He was going to detonate for real. You saved 30 civilians who weren't supposed to be there. But I couldn't tell anyone that without admitting we'd lost control of our own agent. So you buried it." "I saved your life and buried the truth, and I've been carrying that choice for 10 years. She processed this, mind working through implications. If Davidson had hired the shooters, if he'd known the truth all along, if he'd spent a decade protecting her while lying to everyone else, then certain things started making sense. "And Ghost 4, she asked, "who sent those messages?" Davidson's face hardened. "That's what I came to find out. Chen is dead. I saw the body. Personally confirmed his identity. Someone else is using his call sign." "For what purpose?" "To get to you. To make you visible. To pull you out of retirement and put you in one place at one time where anyone watching would know exactly where to find you." "The competition." He nodded. "The Centennial Challenge. Your shot today was broadcast to every military installation in the world. Whoever sent those messages wanted you on display." She lowered her weapon slightly. "Then we're both being played." "That's what I'm afraid of." One of the tactical team members, a woman with sergeant's stripes and hard eyes, spoke up. "Colonel, we should relocate. This position is compromised." Davidson nodded. "Master Sergeant, will you come with us? I have a secure facility where we can debrief properly." Rebecca looked at him, at the team, at the laptop still glowing in her hand. Every instinct said this was another layer of manipulation. But Davidson had just confessed to conspiracy to commit murder. If he wanted her dead, easier ways existed than elaborate stories on rooftops. She made her choice. Lead the way. They moved as a unit, tight formation, weapons ready, through the building and across the compound to a hardened bunker that didn't appear on any official base map. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed over a conference room that smelled of stale coffee and old decisions. Davidson pulled up files on a secure terminal. Sierra Team after action reports, classified assessments, video footage from angles Rebecca had never seen. He walked her through the entire operation, piece by piece, showing her the intelligence that said the asset was safe, the last-minute intel that said he'd gone rogue, the chaos that erupted when her bullet proved the second assessment correct. She watched it all with the detachment of someone viewing ancient history, except it wasn't ancient. It was yesterday. It was every morning she woke up counting rounds, and every night she couldn't sleep for counting dead. When he finished, she sat back in the metal chair, feeling older than 42, older than the mountains, old as stone. "Who knows the truth?" she asked. "About the mission, me, the CIA director who ran the asset, maybe 3 people at JSOC. Everyone else got the sanitized version." "And the shooters you hired?" "Dead, all of them. Killed in action 6 months after Sierra Team. Different theater, different war, same convenient timing." She looked at him. "You had them eliminated." "I didn't," he said, "but someone did, which tells me this goes deeper than one compromised mission." The tactical team leader spoke again. "Colonel, we've got movement on the perimeter. 3 vehicles, no transponders, heading this way." Davidson's face went tight. "Lock it down. Nobody gets in." The team moved instantly, sealing doors, checking weapons, establishing fields of fire. Rebecca found herself with a rifle in her hands again, this time pointed at threats she couldn't see but knew were coming. The lights went out. Emergency backup kicked in, bathing everything in red. Somewhere distant, alarms started screaming. They hit the power grid, someone reported, cutting us off. Davidson grabbed a radio. All units, we have hostile breach, north perimeter, respond code black. The radio crackled static, no response. They're jamming us, the team leader said. Rebecca moved to the wall, found the master light switch, killed even the emergency lighting. Darkness fell complete and absolute. Around her, she heard the team shifting to night vision. She didn't bother. Her eyes adjusted fast, and she'd spent enough nights in enough wars to know that sometimes darkness was the best weapon you had. Movement outside, footsteps, professional, measured. Multiple hostiles coordinating without radio, which meant hand signals and prior planning. These weren't opportunists. This was a hit team. Flint's voice came from behind her, making her jump. When did you get here? Through the back, he said quietly. Saw the commotion, figured you'd be in the middle of it. Good guess. I know you, Shepard. Explosion at the door. Breaching charge. The kind that turned locks into shrapnel and doors into kindling. Smoke poured through the gap. Figures moved in the haze, fast and low. The tactical team opened fire. Muzzle flash strobed the darkness. Spent brass sang against concrete. Someone screamed. Maybe theirs, maybe ours. Hard to tell in the chaos. Rebecca sighted on movement, fired twice, watched a figure drop. Another came through the smoke. She put him down too. Professional, clean, no hesitation. Because this was the thing people didn't understand about soldiers. The moral weight came later. In the moment, when bullets flew and friends died, you didn't philosophize. You just eliminated threats and tried to make sure the people beside you went home breathing. The firefight lasted 90 seconds, felt like hours. When it ended, 4 hostiles were down and the tactical team had 2 wounded. Nobody dead on their side. Small victories measured in heartbeats and functioning organs. Davidson moved through the smoke, checking bodies, looking for identification. Found nothing. No patches, no insignia, no convenient wallet with an address. Professional hitters. The kind you hired when you needed someone gone and couldn't afford connections. He looked at Rebecca. This is about you. Or it's about you, she countered. You're the one who ordered Protocol Shepard. He shook his head. That order came from higher up. I just executed it, or tried to. Then who gave the order? I don't know, it came through JSOC. Classified channel, no attribution. But you followed it. His face hardened. I was a lieutenant colonel with 2 years until retirement and a family that needed me alive. Yes, I followed it, and I've regretted it every day since. Not enough to tell the truth. Would the truth have brought them back? She had no answer for that. The dead stayed dead no matter how many words you wrapped around them. Flint appeared from the smoke, rifle smoking, face grim. We've got a problem. These guys had schematics, floor plans of this bunker, patrol routes, radio frequencies. Someone gave them everything they needed. Inside job, Rebecca said. Has to be. Davidson pulled out his phone, started making calls. Within minutes, MPs flooded the compound. Crime scene teams, investigators, all the machinery of military justice grinding into motion. But Rebecca was already thinking past the immediate threat. Someone had sent Ghost 4's messages. Someone had drawn her out. Someone had known she'd be in this bunker at this exact time, which meant someone had been listening to everything Davidson said, everything she'd learned. She pulled Flynn aside. We need to leave, now. He didn't argue, just nodded and followed her out through the chaos. Two soldiers who'd learned long ago that sometimes survival meant knowing when to retreat. They made it 50 meters before Captain Eva Reyes stepped out of shadows, sidearm drawn but pointed at the ground. "Going somewhere?" she asked. Rebecca's hand moved to her weapon. Reyes saw it, didn't react, just waited. "I'm not here to stop you," Reyes said. "I'm here to help." "What makes you think we need help?" "Because I found something that connects Sierra Team to my father's death, and I think you're the only person who will believe me." Rebecca studied her, young, determined, eyes carrying the weight of questions that had haunted her for years. She recognized that weight, saw it in the mirror every morning. "Talk fast." Reyes holstered her weapon, pulled out a tablet, swiped to a document. "This is my father's last mission report, written 3 days before he died. He was embedded with a forward observation team in Afghanistan. Same region as Sierra Team. Same time frame." "Coincidence?" "That's what I thought too, until I found this." She swiped again. Audio file. She pressed play. A man's voice, strained, speaking fast. "Confirm visual on Sierra Team. They're in position. Target is in the compound, but something's wrong. Target is moving differently. This doesn't match his pattern. Request clarification on rules of engagement." A different voice filtered through radio distortion. "Maintain position. Do not engage Sierra Team. They're being handled." "Sir, they're about to take a shot at our asset." "Let them." Silence. Then the first voice again, horrified. "You're using them as bait." "I'm cleaning up a problem. When Sierra Team eliminates the asset, you eliminate Sierra Team. Make it look like enemy action. Understood?" Long pause, then quietly, "Understood." The recording ended. Rebecca felt something crack inside her chest. "Your father was the second shooter." Reyes nodded, eyes wet but voice steady. "He was ordered to kill you, all of you. But he didn't. He killed the other 3 and let you and Flint escape. Then he died 3 days later in what the report calls an accidental detonation." "No accidents in war," Flint said quietly. "Exactly," Reyes agreed. "Someone silenced him because he didn't complete the mission." Rebecca's mind raced through implications. If Reyes' father had been ordered to eliminate Sierra Team, if he'd refused to kill everyone, if he'd been eliminated for that refusal, then the conspiracy went deeper than Davidson knew, higher than JSOC, into places where orders came without names and deaths came without investigation. "Who gave your father that order?" she asked. Reyes shook her head. "The recording cuts off before attribution, but I've been tracking communication logs from that period, cross-referencing with personnel movements, and I found one name that appears in every document, every order, every report connected to Sierra Team." She swiped to a personnel file. A face appeared on screen, military photo, severe expression, the kind of eyes that made decisions about life and death without blinking. "Lieutenant Colonel Nina Kessler." Rebecca stared at the photo. The woman who challenged her today. The woman running Project Titan. The woman whose husband had died, whose wedding ring still circled her finger like a promise that couldn't be broken. Her husband, Reyes continued, was Captain Michael Kessler. He was Ghost too, one of the 3 soldiers killed in the Sierra Team ambush. The pieces fell into place. Kessler's obsession with replacing human soldiers, her hatred of snipers, her determination to prove machines superior. It wasn't about technology, it was about revenge. "She blames me," Rebecca said, "for getting her husband killed." Reyes nodded. "And she's been working toward this moment for 10 years, building Titan, gaining influence, waiting for the perfect opportunity to make you pay." "The competition." Not just the competition. Look at today's events. You're drawn out of retirement, put on public display, then attacked in a secure bunker. Someone's not trying to kill you quietly. They're trying to make it spectacular, public, a demonstration. Of what? That human snipers are liabilities, that they make mistakes, that they get people killed. Reyes paused. She's going to kill you during the final round tomorrow, in front of cameras, in front of the world. And she's going to use it to justify transitioning entirely to drone systems. Rebecca processed this, mind moving through scenarios. How? I don't know yet, but she has access, resources, and motive that goes beyond professional rivalry. Flint spoke up. Then we don't show up for the final round. They'll come for her anyway, Reyes said. This isn't about the competition anymore. It's about finishing what started 10 years ago. Rebecca looked at both of them, these soldiers who'd chosen to stand beside her when walking away would have been easier, safer, smarter. She made her decision. Then we finish it, she said, but on our terms, not hers. What do you have in mind? Flint asked. She smiled, cold and hard. We give her what she wants, a demonstration, but we make sure she's the one being demonstrated. They spent the next 6 hours planning. Not in the bunker, too compromised. Not on base, too many eyes. They found an abandoned warehouse on the edge of Fort Carson, the kind of place where equipment went to die and nobody asked questions about soldiers coming and going at odd hours. Reyes had access to intelligence files. Flint had contacts in special operations. Rebecca had 20 years of experience turning bad situations into worse ones for people who deserved it. Together, they built a picture of what Kessler had been doing for the past decade. Project Titan wasn't just about drones. It was about a complete restructuring of how America projected lethal force, autonomous systems, AI targeting, remove the human element entirely from the decision to kill. And at the center of it all, a woman who'd lost her husband to human error and decided humans were the problem. She's not wrong, Rebecca said quietly, studying satellite photos of Titan's testing facility. Humans make mistakes. We hesitate, we miss, we get people killed. But we also adapt, Flint countered. We make judgment calls. We know when not to pull the trigger. Machines don't have that problem. Exactly. They don't know when not to shoot. They just calculate and execute. Reyes pulled up another file. I've been tracking Titan's testing records. 98% accuracy rate under controlled conditions. Impressive. Except there's a pattern in the 2% failure. Every miss happens during rapidly changing conditions. Wind shifts, sudden weather, chaos variables that weren't in the initial calculation. Machines calculate wind, Rebecca said, repeating words she'd spoken before. But wind whispers before it blows. Humans can feel that whisper. Machines can't. So we create chaos, Flint said. Force conditions where Titan fails and you succeed. Demonstrate that humans still have value. It's not enough to win, Rebecca said. We need to expose her real motivation. Make her reveal that it's not about progress. It's about revenge. How? Reyes asked. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Then she smiled, grim and certain. We make her think she's won. Give her the shot she's been waiting for. Then we show everyone who's really pulling the trigger. They worked through the night. By dawn, they had a plan. Risky, probably illegal, definitely against regulations. But it had the virtue of being simple enough to work and complex enough that when it fell apart, they might survive the falling. The final round of competition was scheduled for 1,400 hours. Maximum media coverage. Senators in attendance. Defense contractors circling like sharks. All the machinery of American military industry focused on one question. Man or machine? Rebecca arrived at the range with an hour to spare. Flint beside her, rifle case in hand, looking like they'd spent the morning cleaning weapons instead of planning sedition. Reyes had disappeared into the crowd, intelligence tab giving her access to places regular soldiers couldn't go. Colonel Davidson found them near the equipment tent. His face was haggard, no sleep, too much coffee, the look of a man who'd seen his carefully constructed world crack. "You shouldn't be here," he said to Rebecca. "After last night, you should be in protective custody." "I'm exactly where I need to be." He lowered his voice. "I know what you're planning." She met his eyes, then stopped me. He was quiet for a long moment, then shook his head. "I can't because you're right. This needs to end." "So you'll let it happen?" "I'll make sure nobody interferes. Beyond that, you're on your own." "Fair enough." He walked away, shoulders bent, carrying weight she understood better than she wanted to. The crowd gathered, bigger than yesterday. Word had spread about the perfect shot, about the human who'd beaten the machine. Now they wanted to see if lightning struck twice or if yesterday had been luck. Kessler appeared from the VIP section, surrounded by aides and technicians, Titan IV positioned on its mobile platform, sensors gleaming. She saw Rebecca and smiled. Professional, polite, the smile of someone who knew how the story ended. She walked over, Master Sergeant Cain, ready for round 2. Rebecca nodded, "Born ready, Colonel." "Good, because today's target is special. 5,200 meters, new record distance. Titan's been recalibrated specifically for this range." "Confident?" Kessler's smile widened. "Machines don't feel confidence, they just perform." "Must be nice, not feeling things." Something flickered in Kessler's eyes. Anger maybe, or pain, it's practical. "Is that what you tell yourself? That removing feeling makes you stronger?" The smile faded. "I tell myself that feeling gets people killed. Doubt, hesitation, fear, all human weaknesses, all things that cost lives." Rebecca took a step closer, voice dropping. "Like the hesitation that got your husband killed." Kessler went very still. "Careful, Sergeant." "I read the report. Ghost 2 died covering a retreat, protecting his team leader, protecting me." "You killed him," Kessler said quietly. "Your shot, your decision, your fault." "I made a call based on information I had. Your husband made a call based on honor. We were both doing our jobs. And now I'm doing mine, making sure no one else dies because a sniper decided to play hero. By eliminating snipers entirely. By eliminating the human error that makes them unreliable." Rebecca smiled, sad and knowing. "You're not eliminating error, Colonel, you're eliminating guilt. There's a difference." Kessler's face hardened. "We'll see whose philosophy survives the day." She walked back to Titan's position, barking orders at technicians, the consummate professional. But Rebecca had seen the crack, the moment where pain leaked through. That was the weakness. That was where the plan would bite. The range officer called for competitors. Final round, 5,200 meters, one shot each, winner takes all. Titan went first. The machine settled into firing position with hydraulic precision. Sensors swept the range, gathering data, building models, calculating trajectories that accounted for Earth's rotation and the Coriolis effect and 1,000 variables human brains couldn't consciously process. 20 seconds of computation, then the shot. The crowd watched the distant target through spotting scopes and camera feeds, 3,200 meters downrange, waiting. The spotter's voice came over speakers. "Hit, 6 centimeters off center." Applause erupted. 6 centimeters at that distance was near perfect. The machine had performed exactly as designed under ideal conditions. Kessler accepted congratulations with barely concealed satisfaction. The future validated, the past avenged. Rebecca walked to the firing line carrying her rifle like it weighed nothing. The same weapon she'd used yesterday. No upgrades, no modifications, just steel and wood and the accumulated trust of 20 years. Flint took position as her spotter. They didn't speak, didn't need to. The language they shared went deeper than words. She settled into prone, feeling the earth beneath her, solid and real. Loaded a single round. The brass caught sunlight, warm against her fingers. The crowd quieted, 200 people holding breath. She closed her eyes, listened. Wind from the southwest, 15 knots, gusting to 20. Temperature 78 degrees and rising. Humidity 40%. Barometric pressure steady. All the data points that mattered. But beneath the data, something else. A rhythm. The way the wind moved through the valley, following patterns carved by ancient water, shaped by stone, predictable if you stopped trying to predict and just felt. She opened her eyes, adjusted the scope, not to compensate for the wind as it was, but for where it would be when the bullet arrived 3,400 meters downrange. Flint spoke quietly, winds building, 25 knots now. This is suicide range, Shepard. She smiled without humor. What's new? Her finger touched the trigger. Light, barely there. All the weight of 10 years and 3 dead friends and 1 broken woman trying to turn pain into progress, pressing down on that tiny curve of metal. Then she heard it, behind her, a voice from the crowd, sharp with authority. Hold fire, range is compromised. She glanced back, saw Kessler standing, face flushed, pointing at something near the target, saw range officers conferring, looking confused. Kessler's voice carried across the desert. There's a malfunction with the target sensors. We need to pause for safety check. The range officer hesitated. Ma'am, the target is passive. No sensors to malfunction. Visual confirmation shows anomaly. I'm calling safety hold. Rebecca understood immediately. Kessler was stalling, creating disruption. Something had changed, some variable that made her nervous, made her want to stop the shot before it happened. Which meant the plan was working. She ignored the commotion, settled back into position, let the world narrow to the space between her eye and the target. Sergeant, the range officer called. I said hold fire. She fired. The round left the barrel at 2,900 feet per second. Started the long arc through chaos toward a target that couldn't be seen, could barely be imagined, existed more as faith than physics. Behind her, the crowd erupted in confusion. Kessler was shouting. The range officer was demanding explanations. Security was moving. None of it mattered. Rebecca stayed in position, watching through the scope, counting seconds, waiting for the only opinion that counted. 3,400 meters downrange, metal met metal. The sound came back across the desert, clean and sharp and final. The spotter's voice stunned, hit, dead center, perfect. The crowd fell silent. Then someone started clapping. Then everyone, even the ones who'd bet against her, even the ones who wanted machines to win, because they just watched something that transcended competition. They'd watched a human being do the impossible. Rebecca stood, saved her weapon, ejected the casing, caught it, pocketed it. Every round counts. Kessler was staring at her, face pale, hands shaking. Around her, technicians were checking Titan's diagnostics, trying to understand how the machine's perfect shot had been beaten by a human with a rifle built before most of them were born. Rebecca walked toward her, stopped 3 feet away. Your husband would be proud, she said quietly. Not of the machine, of you, for trying to save lives even if you went about it wrong. Kessler's face crumpled. You don't get to talk about him. Someone needs to, because you've spent 10 years turning grief into weapons and it hasn't brought him back. It hasn't made you feel better. It's just made you harder. You killed him. No, Colonel. I made a call. A wrong call based on bad information. But your husband died making his own call, to protect his team, to do his duty. He chose that. Just like I chose to take the shot. Just like you're choosing to blame me instead of accepting that sometimes good soldiers die for no reason except they were in the wrong place when the world turned bad. Kessler's hand moved to her sidearm. Rebecca didn't flinch, just waited. Around them, security was closing in. MPs, base commander, all the authority that came with brass and protocols. But Reyes appeared first, moving through the crowd with intelligence credentials, tablet in hand. Colonel Kessler, she said formally, I have evidence of your involvement in multiple incidents of conspiracy, attempted murder, and misuse of military resources. You're under arrest. Kessler laughed, brittle and broken. On whose authority? JSOC. They've been investigating you for 6 months. Ever since you started funneling Project Titan funds into private military contractors. Rebecca watched understanding dawn in Kessler's eyes. The realization that her grief had been used, manipulated, turned into something that served purposes beyond her knowing. You were being played too, Rebecca said softly. Someone wanted you angry enough to do their work. Someone who benefited from chaos and dead snipers, and a military that trusted machines over men. Who? Kessler whispered. We're working on that. MPs took Kessler into custody. She didn't resist, just walked between them like a woman waking from a long nightmare into a reality somehow worse. Davidson appeared at Rebecca's shoulder. That was reckless. Worked though. This time, next time you might not be so lucky. She looked at him, this man who tried to kill her and tried to save her and had succeeded at both. If there's a next time, I'll worry about it then. The crowd began to disperse. Media fought for statements. Senators demanded briefings. All the noise of a world that ran on explanations and needed everything packaged neat. Rebecca walked away from it. Found Flint waiting by the equipment tent, rifle cases packed, ready to move. Where to now? He asked. Home, she said. Montana, horses. Maybe teaching some kids to shoot. Sounds boring. After this, boring sounds perfect. They walked toward the parking lot, 2 soldiers who'd survived when others hadn't, carrying weight that never got lighter but somehow became easier to bear when you stopped trying to carry it alone. Behind them, the desert wind moved across empty ranges, whispering to targets no one was shooting at anymore, telling stories about distance and chaos, and the thin line between being a hero and being a killer. Rebecca didn't look back. She'd spent 10 years looking back, time now to look forward. Even if forward meant walking away from everything she'd been toward, everything she might still become. The sun dropped toward the mountains. They drove into it, windows down, cold air sharp and clean. And for the first time in a decade, Rebecca Cain felt something like peace beginning to take root in soil that had been salted with too much blood. Montana in December wore silence like a shroud. Snow fell soft and constant, burying the world under white that made everything clean again, at least on the surface. Rebecca Cain stood on her porch watching it accumulate, rifle leaning against the rail beside her, coffee going cold in her hands. 6 months since Fort Carson. 6 months since Kessler's arrest and the congressional hearings that followed. 6 months since she'd walked away from the machine that had defined her for 20 years and tried to remember how to be something other than a weapon. The horses needed feeding. The fence line needed checking. The woodpile needed splitting. All the mundane tasks that filled days when you weren't counting down to moments where everything could go wrong in the space between heartbeats. She missed it sometimes. The clarity, the purpose, the absolute certainty that came with a target at distance and a round in the chamber. Out here, nothing was certain. The weather changed without warning. The horses got sick for no reason. The loneliness pressed in during the long nights when sleep wouldn't come and the ghosts were louder than the wind. But she'd made her choice, retired again, this time for real. Or so she'd thought. The black SUV appeared on her road just after noon, moving slow through fresh snow, government plates catching what little sun broke through the clouds. She recognized it before it stopped, recognized the weight of it. Official business didn't arrive in pickup trucks. Colonel Davidson stepped out. Older than 6 months should have made him, gray spreading from temples to crown, lines deeper around eyes that had seen too much. He wore civilian clothes but carried himself military, spine straight despite whatever burden bent it. She didn't invite him in, just waited on the porch, letting the cold be the third party to whatever conversation was coming. "I told you I was done, Jim," she said. "I know," he stopped at the steps, respecting the boundary, "but something's happened, something that changes things." "Nothing changes. I made my choice." Lieutenant Colonel Kessler escaped custody 3 days ago. Rebecca felt something cold settle in her chest that had nothing to do with weather. How? Professional extraction. 3-man team hit the transport convoy between Fort Carson and the federal detention facility in Denver. 2 guards wounded. Kessler disappeared. We found the extraction vehicle burned out near the Wyoming border. No bodies, no trail. So find her, that's what MPs are for. We did find her. He pulled out a tablet, swiped to a photograph, or what's left of her. Rebecca looked at the image. Took her 3 seconds to process what she was seeing. A body, female, burned beyond recognition, found in a warehouse outside Denver. Dental records confirmed it was Kessler. "Suicide?" Rebecca asked quietly. Davidson shook his head. "Murder. Staged to look like she died in a fire, but the coroner found a bullet wound. Small caliber, back of the head, professional hit. Someone silenced her." "That's what we think. Someone who didn't want her talking during the court-martial. Someone with enough reach to break her out of federal custody and enough cold blood to execute her once she was no longer useful." Rebecca handed back the tablet. "Still doesn't explain your presence." "Because whoever killed her also sent this." He swiped to a new image, a photograph, recent, taken from high ground, looking down at her ranch. At her standing on this exact porch 3 days ago, feeding the horses, unaware she was in someone's crosshairs. The message was clear: you're being watched, you're vulnerable, you're next. "I can handle myself," she said, but her hand had moved unconsciously to where her sidearm would be if she were carrying. "I know you can, but this isn't about capability, it's about inevitability. They're not going to stop. And they're not going to come at you directly. They're going to do what they did to Kessler, use you, manipulate you, then eliminate you when you're no longer convenient. So what do you want from me?" Davidson met her eyes. "I want you to hunt them before they hunt you." She was quiet for a long moment, looking past him to the mountains that had been her sanctuary, wondering if anywhere was really safe when the past refused to stay buried. "Who are they?" "That's what we need to find out, but I have a lead. One name that keeps appearing in the classified files. One person who had access to everything. JSOC operations. Sierra Team Mission Parameters. The order to execute Protocol Shepherd. He swiped to a personnel file. A face appeared. Military photo. 4-star general. The kind of rank where orders didn't get questioned and accountability didn't apply. General Marcus Hale. Retired now. Lives in Virginia. Runs a private military consulting firm that works with half the defense contractors in Washington. Rebecca studied the photo. Hard face. Eyes that calculated before they felt. The kind of officer who saw soldiers as chess pieces and wars as board games played for profit and position. You think he ordered the hit on Sierra Team? I think he benefited from it. The CIA asset you killed was feeding information that would have exposed a massive intelligence failure. Programs that Hale had championed. Budgets he'd defended. If that asset had lived, careers would have ended. Hale's included. So he had us eliminated to cover it up. He had 3 of you eliminated. You were supposed to die too, but I saved you, which means you're a loose end. And men like Hale don't tolerate loose ends. Rebecca felt the old anger rising, cold and hard. What do you want me to do? Walk into his office and put a bullet through his head? Davidson smiled without humor. I want you to do what you do best. Get close. Observe. Find the proof we need to put him away legally. And if I can't find proof, then we'll deal with that when it comes. She looked at him, this man who'd tried to kill her and saved her, and was now asking her to walk back into the fire one more time. Part of her wanted to refuse, to send him away and go back to splitting wood and feeding horses, and pretending the world beyond her fence line didn't exist. But another part, the part that had spent 20 years in uniform, the part that counted rounds and remembered names, that part knew he was right. Running didn't work. Hiding didn't work. The only way out was through. When do we start? She asked. Davidson's shoulders relaxed slightly. Relief maybe, or just the redistribution of weight when someone else agreed to carry part of it. There's a defense industry conference in D.C. next week. Hale will be there, keynote speaker. We can get you credentialed as private security, get you close enough to assess. Private security. She almost laughed. 20 years as a sniper and now I'm playing bodyguard. It's a role, you've played them before. Not for a long time. He handed her a folder, everything you need, credentials, background, cover story. You'll be assigned to protect Senator Alan Cartwright, former Army. Good man. He knows you're really there for Hale. And what am I looking for? Anything that connects him to Sierra Team, to Kessler's death, to the conspiracy that's been running for 10 years. Recordings, documents, admissions. We need something that ties him directly to the orders. He's a 4-star general. He didn't get there by leaving evidence. Then make him create some. She looked at the folder, at the life she'd be stepping into, temporary and false but dangerous in ways that bullets couldn't match. This kind of hunting required different skills. Patience, performance, the ability to wear a face that wasn't yours while searching for truth in the spaces between lies. I'll need Flint, she said. He's already briefed. He'll be there as communication support. And Ray's intelligence liaison. She's been tracking Hale's financial records, found some interesting patterns. Rebecca nodded slowly. All right, I'm in. But this is the last time, Jim. After this, win or lose, I'm done for real. I understand. Do you? Because I've been done before. Keep getting pulled back. At some point, done has to mean done. Davidson's face creased with something like regret. I hope you get that chance. I really do. He left the same way he'd come. Black SUV disappearing into snow that fell heavier now, covering his tracks, making the world white and pristine and empty of everything that had just happened. Rebecca stood on the porch until cold forced her inside. Then she opened the folder and started reading about the woman she'd need to become. Washington in January was all marble and suits, and the kind of cold that came from concrete instead of mountains. Rebecca walked through it wearing clothes that fit wrong and a name that wasn't hers, playing a role she'd rehearsed but didn't believe. Catherine Wolfe, former Secret Service, now freelance executive protection, hired to provide security for Senator Cartwright during the defense conference. Background checked out, credentials legitimate, all of it real except the woman wearing it. The conference was held at a downtown hotel, the kind where rooms cost more per night than most people earned in a week. Defense contractors filled the lobby, men in expensive suits discussing contracts worth billions, deciding which weapons would be built, and which wars would be fought, and which soldiers would carry the tools they were selling. Rebecca moved through them invisible, just another security professional, eyes scanning crowds, hands ready, the perfect picture of competence and discretion. Senator Cartwright was exactly what Davidson had promised, former infantry officer, Silver Star from Desert Storm, the kind of politician who'd actually worn the uniform before he wore the suit. He greeted her with a firm handshake and eyes that assessed without judging. "Ms. Wolfe," he said, "Colonel Davidson speaks highly of you." "I do my job, Senator. That's all I ask." He lowered his voice slightly. "I understand you're here for more than just my safety." "Yes, sir." "Then do what you need to do. I'll make sure you have access." "Appreciate it." The conference schedule showed Hale speaking at 1400 hours. Topic: the future of asymmetric warfare, which probably meant an hour of explaining why America needed to spend more money on weapons systems that didn't work against enemies who fought with improvised explosives and ideology. Rebecca used the morning to scout, identified exits, memorized faces, located Flint in the communications room, wearing a hotel tech uniform, surrounded by equipment that did a lot more than manage conference audio. He slipped her an earbud when she passed. "Comms check." She fitted it carefully, hidden by hair, 5 by 5. "Ray's is in room 412. She's got eyes on Hale's suite. So far nothing interesting. Lot of meetings, lot of phone calls, all of it careful and clean. He's been doing this a long time. He won't slip easy." "Then we make him slip." The keynote started on schedule. Auditorium packed with contractors and officers and politicians, all of them here to see a legend speak. General Marcus Hale took the stage to applause, 4 stars retired but still carrying weight, still commanding rooms just by entering them. He was 72 but looked younger, fit, sharp, the kind of man who'd scheduled death for 900 years from now and expected it to show up on time. Rebecca stood at the back, hands clasped, watching not the general but the crowd, looking for tells, for people who reacted wrong, for the watchers watching the watchers. Hale spoke about the changing nature of warfare, about how technology was eliminating the need for boots on ground, about how drones and AI and autonomous systems would save American lives by removing Americans from the battlefield entirely. It was Kessler's argument, polished, professional, delivered by someone with the credibility to make it policy. And underneath it all the same message: humans are the problem, remove them, replace them, make war clean and efficient and distant. Rebecca felt sick listening to it, not because it was wrong, because parts of it were right. Soldiers did make mistakes, did hesitate, did die for reasons that had nothing to do with tactics and everything to do with being human in situations that demanded something more or less than human. But removing the human element didn't make war better. It just made it easier. Easier to start, easier to wage, easier to forget. The speech ended to standing ovation. Hale accepted it with the modest smile of someone who knew exactly how important he was and didn't need applause to confirm it. Rebecca watched him leave the stage, surrounded by aides and admirers, moving toward a private reception in a suite upstairs. The kind of reception where real business happened away from cameras and crowds. Flint's voice in her ear. "Reyes says he's got a meeting at 1600. Private. Just him and 2 other people." She couldn't id them from the hallway camera, but they arrived separately and they're both carrying. Carrying weapons to a defense conference wasn't unusual, but carrying to a private meeting with a retired general suggested something other than professional courtesy. "Get me audio," Rebecca said quietly. "Working on it." She followed at a distance as Hale's group moved through the hotel, lost visual when they entered the restricted floor, but Reyes had camera access. Rebecca found a maintenance closet, slipped inside, watched on her phone as Reyes fed her video from multiple angles. Hale entered his suite, dismissed his aides, waited alone for 17 minutes. Then his guests arrived. 2 men, late 50s, both military-bearing despite civilian clothes, both armed under jackets that didn't quite conceal the bulk. They entered without knocking, comfortable, familiar. The door closed. Rebecca watched empty hallway, waiting for Flint to work his magic with the audio bugs Reyes had planted during housekeeping. 30 seconds of static, then voices. Flint's work was good. Not perfect, some distortion, occasional dropout, but clear enough to understand. Hale's voice calm and measured, status. First man rough and direct, Kessler's handled, clean, no connections. Second man smoother, the investigation stalled. They can't link you to the escape or the execution, you're clear. Rebecca felt her jaw tighten. They were talking about Kessler's murder like it was a contract completed, professional, emotionless, just another problem solved with a bullet. Hale again and Cain. Long pause. First man, she's in D.C. Hotel security footage has her moving through the building. Another pause, longer. Rebecca could almost hear Hale thinking. Interesting, here for the conference. Second man, credentialed as private security, working for Senator Cartwright. Too much of a coincidence, she's here for me. Probably. Can you reach her? Hale asked. First man, not here. Too many witnesses, too much security. Then we wait, follow her when she leaves, take her somewhere quiet, make it look like an accident. What about Davidson? He's the one who sent her. When she disappears, he'll know we're serious. He'll back off or he'll be next. Rebecca's hand moved to her weapon. Every instinct screamed to breach that door, to end this now, to put bullets through all 3 of them and sort out the legality later. But she held position, listened, let them keep talking. They discussed logistics, timing, methods, all of it calm and professional, 3 men planning murder like they were planning dinner, and underneath it all the confirmation Davidson had needed. Hale had ordered Kessler's death, was planning Rebecca's, had been running this conspiracy for a decade, cleaning up loose ends, protecting secrets that went all the way back to Sierra Team and beyond. The meeting broke up. Hale's guests left separately, 15 minutes apart, professional protocol for people who didn't want to be seen together. Rebecca slipped out of the closet, moved through back corridors, found Flint in the comm room. You get all that? She asked. Every word. Reyes is already sending it to Davidson. This is enough for arrest warrants. Not yet, they'll lawyer up, claim the recording's illegal, inadmissible, we need more. Like what? Like Hale confessing directly, on record, no ambiguity. Flint stared at her. How do you plan to make that happen? She smiled, cold and certain, by giving him what he wants. The plan was simple, risky, probably illegal, but it had the virtue of being exactly the kind of thing that would either end the conspiracy or end her. Rebecca sent a message through hotel staff, requested private meeting with General Hale, said she had information about Sierra team he'd want to hear, signed it Catherine Wolfe. Hale's response came within an hour, 2200 hours, his suite, come alone. She showed the message to Flint and Reyes. It's a trap, Reyes said immediately. Of course it's a trap, but it's also an opportunity. For him to kill you. For me to get him talking, get him to admit everything, with you recording every word. Flint shook his head. Too dangerous. He'll have backup, security. You walk in there, you might not walk out. Then make sure the recording survives even if I don't. They argued for 20 minutes. Rebecca listened patiently, then overruled them both. This is the reason I came here. Find proof. I'm finding it. By getting yourself killed. If that's what it takes. She spent the hours before the meeting preparing. Not weapons, not tactics. Those would be useless if Hale decided to end this with violence. Instead, she prepared mentally, running through scenarios, planning conversational paths, thinking about how to get a 4-star general to confess to conspiracy and murder. The key was ego. Men like Hale didn't get where they were without believing themselves smarter than everyone else. Untouchable, protected by rank and connections, and the simple fact that they'd gotten away with it for so long they'd stopped believing they could be caught. She'd use that, make him feel superior, make him want to explain, to justify, to show her how clever he'd been. At 21:45, she left her room wearing a wire Reyes had given her. Broadcast quality, encrypted, recording to 3 separate servers in case one was compromised. Flint and Reyes would be listening from the comm room, ready to call in FBI if things went wrong, ready to extract if she gave the signal. But Rebecca didn't plan on giving signals. She planned on walking into that suite and walking out with everything they needed to end this. Or not walking out at all. The elevator ride to Hale's floor felt longer than any infill she'd ever made. The hallway stretched empty and quiet, expensive carpet muffling footsteps, artwork on walls that cost more than she'd earned in a year. She knocked on the suite door, 3 times firm and steady. It opened immediately. One of Hale's men from the earlier meeting, first man, rough voice, hard eyes. He looked her up and down, professional assessment, then stepped aside. "She's clean," he said to someone inside. Rebecca entered. The suite was massive, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Capitol, furniture that belonged in museums, all the trappings of power and money and influence. General Hale stood by the window, silhouette against city lights, looking like something out of a recruiting poster. "Ms. Wolfe," he said without turning, "or should I say Master Sergeant Cain?" She didn't react, just closed the door behind her, hands visible, making no sudden moves. He turned, studying her with eyes that had ordered men into combat and evaluated enemies across conference tables. "You're very bold, coming here. Alone." "I'm not alone. I'm wired. People are listening. If I don't walk out of here, the FBI will be through that door in minutes." Hale smiled. "I know, which is the reason you'll walk out. I'm not here to hurt you, Sergeant. I'm here to recruit you." That stopped her. Recruit. He gestured to a chair. "Sit, please. Let's talk like professionals." She sat, not because she trusted him, because it gave her better angles if this turned violent. Hale poured 2 glasses of whiskey, offered her one. She declined. He shrugged, drank both himself. "You're very good at what you do," he said. "Sierra team. The competition at Fort Carson. You're perhaps the finest sniper America has produced in a generation. It would be a waste to kill you." "So what do you want?" "I want you to work for me. My firm handles contracts all over the world. We need people with your skills. The pay is excellent. The work is, let's say, flexible in its interpretation of rules of engagement." "You want me to be an assassin?" "I want you to be what you already are. A weapon, just pointed at different targets. Targets that deserve it. Terrorists, war criminals, people who hide behind borders and bureaucracy." "And who decides they deserve it?" "I do." He said it simply, without shame. The same way he'd probably ordered Protocol Shepherd, just another decision made by someone who believed himself qualified to make it. Rebecca leaned forward slightly. "Tell me about Sierra team, about the order to eliminate us." Hale's smile widened. "Ah, there it is, the real reason you came." "One of many." He sat down across from her, comfortable, confident. Sierra team was a mistake from the beginning. The CIA ran an asset we'd all agreed was too valuable to risk, but someone panicked, sent your team in without full briefing. You took a shot you weren't supposed to take, killed an asset worth millions in intelligence. So you had us killed to cover it up. I had the problem solved. 3 soldiers died. Unfortunate. But the alternative was explaining to Congress how we'd lost control of our own operative, how years of work and billions in funding had been wasted. That explanation would have ended careers, mine included. And my career didn't matter. You were going to be collateral damage either way. I just controlled how and when." Rebecca felt rage building, cold and sharp, but she kept her voice level. "And Kessler?" Hale's expression darkened slightly. Kessler was useful until she wasn't. Her grief made her predictable. Her crusade against human snipers served my purposes, but she became unstable, started asking questions, following trails that led back to me, so I had her extracted and eliminated. Just like that. Just like that. He said it without emotion, without regret. Life and death reduced to tactical decisions made in luxury suites by men who'd never carry the weight of pulling triggers themselves. "You understand this is all being recorded," Rebecca said quietly. Hale nodded. "I assumed so, which is the reason none of it matters." "How do you figure?" "Because I have recordings too." He pulled out a phone, pressed play. Rebecca's voice came through speakers, audio from earlier conversations, edited, spliced, words taken out of context and rearranged into admissions of conspiracy, planning violence, threatening a general officer. Her blood went cold. "You think your recordings will stand up in court?" Hale asked. "Against mine, against my lawyers, my connections. I've been playing this game for 40 years, Sergeant. You're good, but you're not that good." Rebecca stood slowly. "You're right, I'm not that good at your game, but I don't play your game." She pulled her sidearm, aimed it at his head. "I play mine." The 2 bodyguards moved instantly, weapons coming up. Mexican standoff, 3 guns, 1 room, nobody with clear advantage. Hale didn't flinch. "Go ahead. Pull the trigger. Prove you're just another killer with a weapon. Prove that removing human judgment from warfare is exactly the right call." Her finger rested on the trigger. Light. Barely there. All the weight of 10 years and too many bodies pressing down on that tiny curve of metal. In her ear, Flint's voice. "Shepherd, don't, we have enough, walk away." But walking away meant Hale would lawyer up, would make the recordings disappear, would use his connections and his money and his power to turn this into her problem instead of his. She'd seen it before, watched guilty men walk because the system was designed to protect men like them. Her finger tightened, then stopped, because she heard another voice, not Flint's, not Ray's, a memory. Ghost 4, Thomas Chen, words he'd said to her years ago before a mission when she'd been young and angry and certain that killing was always the answer. The rifle doesn't care about justice, he'd said. Only you do. Make sure you're pulling the trigger for the right reasons. She lowered the weapon. Hale's smile returned. Smart choice. Not for you. She raised her left hand, showed him the panic button Ray's had given her. FBI response team, already in the building, already moving. Hale's smile faded. Your recordings won't matter, Rebecca said quietly, because mine are already in federal hands, along with financial records showing payments to the contractors who killed Kessler, along with testimony from Ray's about her father's murder, along with Davidson's witness statement about Protocol Shepard. The doors burst open. FBI, weapons drawn, commands shouted, professional and overwhelming. Hale's bodyguards dropped their weapons, smart enough to know when the game was over. But Hale just stood there, looking at Rebecca with something like respect. Well played, Sergeant. She met his eyes. This isn't about playing. It's about making sure the people who sent my friends to die face the same judgment they handed out so easily. They arrested him without drama, read rights, applied cuffs, led him away still wearing the suit that had protected him for so long. Rebecca stood in the emptying suite, adrenaline fading, leaving behind exhaustion that went bone deep. Flint appeared in the doorway. That was the stupidest, bravest thing I've ever seen you do. Probably not the stupidest. Top 5 at least. She managed a tired smile. It's over. Ray's entered behind Flint, the legal part's just starting, but the dangerous part, yeah, it's over. They walked out together, 3 soldiers who'd survived when they shouldn't have, carrying weight that had gotten lighter but would never fully leave. Outside, dawn was breaking over Washington, the kind of pale winter light that made marble buildings look clean and new and worthy of the ideals they were supposed to represent. Rebecca breathed cold air, feeling it burn clean in lungs that had breathed too much gun smoke and desert dust. Davidson met them on the street. His face showed relief and something deeper, gratitude maybe, or just the release of pressure when a debt finally gets paid. It's done, he said. She nodded. Now it's done. What will you do? Go home, feed my horses, split some wood. Remember what normal feels like. You've earned it. She looked at him, this man who tried to kill her and saved her and had finally helped her end the thing that started it all. What about you? He smiled, sad and knowing. I'll face whatever court-martial comes, answer for Protocol Shepard, take my punishment. It wasn't all your fault. Enough of it was. They shook hands, 2 soldiers who'd been on opposite sides and the same side, and had finally found their way to something like resolution. Rebecca walked away, Flint beside her, leaving Davidson standing in morning light looking smaller than a colonel should look, carrying weight that would break most men but that he'd carry anyway because that's what soldiers did. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal proceedings and media attention and all the machinery of justice grinding through evidence and testimony. Hale's trial became national news, the conspiracy unraveled thread by thread. Names were named, careers ended, reforms were promised. Rebecca watched it all from Montana, declining interviews, ignoring requests for statements, letting the lawyers and politicians do what they did while she went back to the quiet work of remembering how to be human. Winter gave way to spring. Snow melted. The valley turned green. Horses foaled. Life continued in all the ways it was supposed to when war wasn't pressing down on every moment. 6 months after Hale's arrest, a young woman appeared on horseback at the edge of Rebecca's property. Late 20s, athletic build, eyes that calculated before they observed, military bearing despite civilian clothes. The woman dismounted, offered her hand. "Master Sergeant Cain, I'm Lieutenant Mia Torres. I was hoping you could teach me to shoot." Rebecca studied her, saw herself 20 years ago, hungry, determined, looking for someone to show her how to turn talent into skill. "What's your reason?" Torres didn't hesitate. "Because I watched your testimony at Hale's trial. Watched you explain the reason human judgment matters. The reason machines can calculate but can't understand. The reason soldiers need to feel the weight of every round." She paused, something shifting in her face. "My grandfather was part of the team that hunted you after Sierra. He died feeling guilty. I want to learn from the woman who showed him there was another way." Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, then nodded toward the range she'd built in the valley below. "You know how to handle a rifle?" "Yes, ma'am." "Then let's see if you know how to listen to the wind." They walked down together, teacher and student, continuing a cycle that stretched back through generations of soldiers who'd learned that shooting was easy, but knowing when not to shoot was what separated warriors from killers. At the range, Rebecca handed Torres an old rifle, the same one she'd used at Fort Carson, the one that had proven human skill still mattered. "This belonged to my spotter," she said, "man named Marcus Stone. He'd want someone to use it who understood what it meant." Torres accepted it with appropriate reverence. Rebecca loaded a single round, chambered it, handed the weapon over. "Target's 800 meters. Wind's variable. Trust what you feel, not what you think." Torres settled into position. Rebecca watched her breathing, her stillness, the way she closed her eyes and listened before looking. "Good," Rebecca said quietly. "Now tell me what you hear." "Wind southwest, maybe 12 knots. "What else?" Torres was quiet, concentrating. "My heartbeat." "And?" "The space between them." Rebecca smiled. "That's where every shot lives, in that space. Remember it." Torres fired. The round flew true, hit 6 inches left of center. She started to apologize. Rebecca stopped her. "The wind shifted half a second before you pulled the trigger. You couldn't have known, but now you know what it feels like. Next time you'll feel it coming." They spent the afternoon shooting, Rebecca teaching the lessons Flint had taught her, the lessons Ghost 4 had taught before that, the lessons that stretched back through every soldier who'd ever understood that the weapon mattered less than the hand that held it. As the sun dropped toward the mountains, Torres prepared to leave, but she paused at her horse, looking back. "Ma'am, the trial. They're saying Hale might only get 10 years, that his lawyers are finding technicalities." Rebecca nodded. "Probably will. Men like that always have options." "Doesn't that make you angry?" "Every day, but anger doesn't change anything. Teaching does. Making sure the next generation understands the weight. That's how you win." Torres swung into the saddle, looked down at Rebecca. "Thank you for the lesson, for everything. Come back next week. We'll work on distance." The young lieutenant rode away, leaving Rebecca alone with the mountains and the memories, and the rifle that had survived when its owners hadn't. She walked to the small memorial she'd built on the ridge above her ranch. 4 stones, simple, unmarked except for the call signs carved into them. "Ghost 2, Ghost 3, Ghost 4, and one for the living for Flint, whose place in her history deserved marking even though he was alive and well in Texas. She stood there as the last light failed, counting the years, counting the rounds, counting all the ways things could have gone different if anyone had made different choices. But choices were made, prices were paid, and all that remained was making sure the debt honored the dead instead of just adding to their number. Her phone buzzed, text message, unknown number. She almost deleted it, almost. But she opened it instead. 4 words appeared. They're not all gone. Then an image loaded. Surveillance photo, recent, taken from high ground, looking down at a compound in a country she recognized from topography. 3 figures, military bearing, setting up equipment. The caption below read, 2nd Sierra Team, active, ongoing op, compromised, need extraction. Rebecca stared at the screen, felt the old familiar weight settling onto shoulders that had finally started to unknot. Another text arrived, 40 miles north, tonight come alone, this is real. She should ignore it, should delete the message and go inside and pour whiskey and forget she ever saw it. She should. But she didn't. Instead, she went inside, loaded her rifle, checked her kit, made a phone call. Flint answered on the second ring. She spoke without preamble. How fast can you get to Montana? His pause lasted 2 seconds. How deep is the trouble? Deep enough. I'm already packing. She hung up, looked at the rifle, at the stones outside, at the choice between peace and duty that every soldier eventually faced. Made her decision. Because some debts didn't end with trials or time or even death. Some debts only ended when the last round was counted and the last name was brought home. And the shepherd always brought her flock home. Always. She walked out into the Montana night, rifle on her shoulder, darkness gathering like an old friend, stars overhead bearing witness to choices made and prices yet to be paid. Behind her, the ranch lights faded. Ahead, the mountains waited, patient and eternal, and indifferent to the small dramas of soldiers who thought they could retire from wars that never ended. She drove north through gathering dark, counting heartbeats, counting rounds, counting all the ways this could be a trap or a lie or the truth she'd spent 10 years trying to escape. Didn't matter which. She'd find out soon enough. And when she did, win or lose, live or die, at least she'd know she'd answered when the call came. Because that's what shepherds did. They answered. They protected. They brought the flock home. Even when the flock was ghosts, and the home was just a stone with a name carved into it. Even then. Especially then. The darkness swallowed her truck, her path, her certainty. But it couldn't swallow the one thing that kept her moving forward through every war and every loss, and every impossible choice. The knowledge that some debts were worth dying for. And bringing soldiers home was the only debt that mattered. The road stretched north into unknown. She followed it anyway. And the mountains, patient and eternal, watched her go. I've spent 20 years studying military history, but stories like Rebecca's remind me why individual soldiers matter more than any technology. That 4,800-meter shot wasn't just physics and wind calculation. It was a woman carrying 10 years of guilt, 3 names she couldn't forget, and one last chance at redemption. What hit you hardest in this story? The betrayal, the impossible shot, or the choice she made at the end? Drop your thoughts below. And if you served or knew someone who did, you understand why some debts never expire. More stories coming. Hit subscribe so you don't miss them.